Bethlehem Royal Hospital opened in 1357 in London, England, and is known as the oldest in the world. The hospital was created in order to house the mentally unstable and later was nicknamed Bedlam, which means chaos and confusion. The hospital was so poorly run that the patients were left to roam the hospital and even the surrounding neighborhood with no supervision. The facility was run by managers who called themselves the keepers. Some of the patients who resided at Bedlam were not even mentally ill. Rather, they were homeless people who needed shelter. Other patients found in Bedlam were generally diagnosed with mania, homicide, infanticide, and other criminal offenses. These patients were subjected to horrendous cruelty, experimentation, neglect, and humiliation. The treatments were generally used in isolation and in experimentation. One popular form of treatment used at Bedlam was called rotating therapy. During this, patients were placed in a chair suspended from the ceiling and were spun about 100 times a minute in order to induce vomiting to allow the patient to purge. Patients that were diagnosed as disturbed were chained to the walls with only beds of straw to sleep in. Many patients were malnourished almost to the point of starvation, but when given food, the menu was scarce of healthy options. The hospital relied on the support of donations from the neighborhood, so the hospital was open for people to donate food and/or money. Soon the hospital began to charge community members to visit, thus creating a sideshow of the patients. The public was invited to gawk at patients displayed in cages and even poke them with sticks and throw things at them.
Psychiatric services were unknown in Nepal until 1965, when the first psychiatric ward was opened in Burr General Hospital. It originally had 5 beds, but grew to 12 in 1965. In 1985, the mental ward split from the hospital to become its own institution, which held 39 beds. It remains the only mental health hospital in the country today. In Nepal, most people believe that suffering from mental illness is the same as being mad. They are unfit to remain in society, and in many cases their families, because of the belief that they have lost control over themselves, or in many cases have been possessed by an unholy spirit or black magic. Individuals with severe mental disorders, as well as their family members, are targets of stigma and discrimination to the point where they hesitate to come forward for appropriate treatment.
I don't know about it at all. So like when you say mental health, it's only like something I think only when someone is crazy, like they deem them crazy, that's considered mental health issue.
And what would crazy be? Like what would that encompass?
People who, I mean, it's a very bad way of looking at it, in terms of our society in general, and again because of lack of education and awareness on these matters. But I guess just someone who does not act normal, who cannot think normally, or you can see in their behavior.
Yeah, just like different than the norm.
Yeah, they cannot reason. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Samdet Chowphraya Institute of Psychiatry was the first psychiatric hospital built in Thailand in 1889. The ruler at the time, King Rama V, was the one who established it with the name Insane Asylum. In 1932, Dr. Thian Tu Wichian became the first Thai hospital director and changed the name from Insane Asylum to Thornbury Psychiatric Hospital. Then in 1942, Dr. Saifon Singh Kao became the new director and made more changes. He put up screens and removed all steel bars, changed the name of the wards to those of flowers for a more pleasant feeling, employed love into patient care, and treated patients as if they were their children. In 1956, he renamed the place Samdet Chowphraya Hospital.
In 1915, the government of Vietnam set up a mental hospital in Bien Hoa of the South with 800 beds. It was essentially a custodial home for mad people with little care or treatment. The conditions were harsh. Patients slept on concrete floors and received only a handful of cooked rice daily. Further, they were never examined by doctors. Instead, doctors just looked at them through holes in the walls, and if someone died, the doctors sent in an employee to pull him or her out for burial. In 1946, a neurologist built a facility for psychiatric patients at the Bach Mai Chamber of Commerce. It was a psychiatric detention facility which held 50 so-called crazy people. The conditions here were harsh too. Patients lived and slept on concrete pads without any room curtains, and the cleaning of patients and the chambers were done simply using sprinklers of water by the staff. Most people in Vietnam believed that mental illness was caused by evil spirits. Treatments included worshiping and evil evicting practices such as drowning, burning limbs and nails, and starving in chambers. They also used folk remedies, which often involved fatal poisoning. The government of Vietnam in 1976 issued Resolution 15 on establishing a mental hospital system across the country. This is a great turning point to facilitate the development of the Vietnamese psychiatry sector and to improve mental health care services. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Hi, my name is Ling, and I'm a junior. My major is psychology and educational studies, and I'm from Vietnam.
In Vietnam, are there any sort of mental institutions or psychiatric hospitals?
As far as I know, there are private practices, but our only official hospital, there's only one, yeah.
And socially, how are these types of institutions viewed?
They're viewed mostly as hospitals, and it's viewed upon very badly. It's like a place for crazy people who can't function normally to go to. Yeah.
So would you say there's a stigma surrounding them?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Have you heard of any specific cases or what the conditions are like or anything like that?
What I hear about most is I would probably describe it as kind of like schizophrenia. And mostly they're not discussed how they're treated or anything. It was just they had these symptoms and then they went into the hospital and they're getting treated, and that's pretty much all we know.
Did you learn about it at all in school when you were in Vietnam?
No, nothing.
Okay, well, I think that's it.
The most famous asylum in Australia was the Yarra Bend Lunatic Asylum, built in 1848 in Melbourne. It had many problems that weren't dealt with until Dr. Thomas Embling visited and decided to do something about it. What he found were drunken guards who could barely monitor the patients, who would run around and make anywhere their toilet. At night, all he heard was yelling, screaming, stamping, and hammering. He got the place to be renovated so that it could be a precinct for treating the so-called damaged, troubled, and hopeless. Even with this change, it still wasn't a good place for the patients and was demolished in 1930.